Hello, hi friends, welcome. My name is Nilesh. This video is about my experience with the exam, which is Certified Kubernetes Administrator or CKA. I recently cleared this exam at the second attempt, and I would like to share with you my exam preparation and what was the experience I had during this exam. So let's get started with understanding what is this exam all about and what are the prerequisites required for this. So as you can see in this certificate, which was issued to me on 3rd of December, I have completed this, and in case you want to verify, you can use this certificate verification tool provided by the Linux Foundation, which conducts this exam along with the Cloud Computing CNCF Foundation, Cloud Native Foundation. So the exam curriculum is based on different things related to administering the Kubernetes cluster, and it is spread across these 5 main topics, starting with storage, which consists of about 10% of the questions related to the exam. Then the troubleshooting is about 30%, and you can read through the different topics or the domains under each of these headlines, what it tries to gauge the capabilities or knowledge of the person who is taking this exam. I've also provided a link here at the bottom, so in case you want to go into the details and understand more about these content, you can follow the link. I will also provide the link at the bottom or in the description of this video. So along with troubleshooting, we also have workloads and scheduling, which consist of 15% of the questions, and 25% of questions are related to the cluster architecture, installation, configuration, which covers things like the role-based access control, installing the basic Kubernetes cluster using kubeadm, and also the etcd backup and restore activities. And then the final 20% is related to the services and networking. This is purely a hands-on test, so there is no multiple choice questions, and you are expected to complete all the tasks which appear as questions, and based on that you are graded or your score is calculated. So you need to really understand how Kubernetes works and how to administer the Kubernetes cluster. So the time limit for this test is 2 hours, and minimum passing score is 66%. Once you pass this test, your certificate is valid for 3 years. And in case you are not able to pass the test in the first attempt, you get one free retake. When I took the test, this was based on 1.21 version of the Kubernetes, but this version keeps changing as and when the new version of Kubernetes is released. So based on when you take up the test, the respective version of Kubernetes might change, and you need to be mindful of any specific changes which might have happened to that particular version for which you are answering the test. I would like to share with you some of the resources that helped me while preparing for this test, and how did I clear the test. First and foremost, the documentation of Kubernetes is very good. I would say the extent at which all the concepts are explained is very detailed, and this is like the only thing which is allowed during the test. You can use this documentation as a reference during the test itself, and here are some of the links which I've provided. These are the top level links, I would say. You would need to go to the underlying links to understand the details of all the concepts which were in the curriculum. So one thing which I found useful is this tasks. So let's look at the task. So these tasks are a series of steps which you will need to administer the cluster, and you can follow these tasks to get your hands and use these with the actual Kubernetes cluster. You can set up a cluster yourself and then run all these tasks to see how different things like networking, how the services, how the secrets, how containers, pods work, and all these tasks, they help you to understand how Kubernetes works internally. Then there is the cheat sheet, which is helpful when you want to do some of the common tasks, like you want to search for some objects in the Kubernetes cluster, or you want to look for resources which are taking, let's say, highest number of CPUs or RAM. So for those kind of things, you have this cheat sheet, and the most important part of this cheat sheet is things like the autocomplete. So when you take up the actual test, in case your cluster is not set up with the Kubernetes autocomplete feature, you can use this to edit your bash file or your profile and set this so that it's helpful for you during the test. I'll cover that later in the tips and tricks as well. But this cheat sheet gives you like a common set of commands which are quite helpful when you are dealing day to day with your Kubernetes cluster and how to manage your Kubernetes cluster. This talks about like finding resources, then updating resources. It also has settings or commands for the patching of resources, and almost all the things which are covered as part of this test. So that is the documentation of Kubernetes itself. Along with that, some sort of external e-learning is also useful in my opinion. So I took the Linux Foundation provided bundle which comes with Kubernetes CKA test as well as the Kubernetes fundamentals course. This one was part of the Black Friday deal that I took last year in December. So I got around 60 or 65% discount on the original price. So as of today, if you see, this same bundle is available for $575, and you can get $100 discount if you take this as a bundle, or if you take just the exam, that would cost you $375. The other option is you can use some other courses, e-learning courses like Udemy. There is one by Mumshad Mohammed which is quite popular. You can see that 143,000 plus students have taken this course, and this also comes with a practice test. So one of this is helpful in my opinion because documentation can be sometimes quite lengthy and you want to focus on the core concepts. So in that case, if you get the guidance from the experienced instructors, that is really helpful, and it did help me personally. Apart from this, I also found other resources on GitHub. For example, there are some repositories which are provided by people who have already cleared this test. This one, for example, is by Shubham Tattvamasi for the CKA related test, or CKA specific test, I would say. This one is, let's see, when was this created? It was created about 2 years ago. So some of the commands or some of the things that are mentioned here might be outdated, but I still found it useful because it has these aliases and then also resources which are mentioned, which are helpful to get started and to focus our areas on, like the Kubernetes in action or Kubernetes the hard way. This is like the Bible if you want to really understand the internals of how Kubernetes works. So this one is highly recommended, I would say. Then there is another one which I found quite useful by Walid Shari. That is also for Kubernetes Certified Administrator CKA test. So let me close the cheat sheet and the other reference here. I think this one is more recent compared to the 2 years old from the earlier reference. So this one is like 4 months old. So I would say this is more relevant. And here again, you find links to the resources for each of those sections which the test tries to gauge the individual who is taking the test. And this is also organized by the different sections. And you also have references to some YouTube videos and other references which are quite useful. You also have references to the practice test which this individual took, and the alternative, like I mentioned about Udemy, but there are also courses from A Cloud Guru. There is Pluralsight reference here, and other recommended references. So I would say have a look at this. You might again find this useful. Then there is one which I created myself using the Linux Foundation as a reference, and I created my demo cluster, or the cluster where I was doing all the hands-on on Azure Kubernetes, not Azure Kubernetes, sorry, on Azure, using my Microsoft Azure MVP subscription. So in this you will find the commands that I used, and also if you want to set up your cluster on Azure, there is a PowerShell script which I have created, so you might find that useful. So let me switch to Visual Studio Code, and I can quickly show you that script. So here under the K8s kubeadium, kubeadium is the tool which is used to create the cluster and provision the Kubernetes resources, or the kubelet and the other resources required for setting up the Kubernetes cluster. So there is this K8s Azure PowerShell script which creates a 3-node cluster, 1 master and 2 worker nodes. You can use this script for your purpose by changing these values for the subscription name, resource group name, and the location, and you can then run all the other commands which are shown here under the different sections like security, high availability, and the other sections. So that is my own personal repo, which again might be helpful for you. With regards to the kubectl itself, there is a cheat sheet provided by Denny Zhang. This I found useful because of the different combinations that Denny tries to show you. So this is not just for CKA purpose, I would say. This is also for CKAD or CKS if you're taking those other exams related to Kubernetes, or this is also very helpful for your day-to-day operations. If you are working with Kubernetes on daily basis, I'm sure you will find this cheat sheet very useful, and I think there is a PDF version of this provided in A4 format, so you might as well print this and stick it in front of your desk or your monitor close to the place where you can have it as a handy reference. Then the next resource which I found useful was this network policy recipes. So Ahmet Alp Balkan, the creator of these power tools for kubeNX and kubectx, he has this very good repository which explains how the network policies work with Kubernetes, and he has shown 14 to 15 different ways in which we can configure the egress and ingress policies for the traffic when it is dealing with the network policies in Kubernetes. So I found this again very useful to understand specifically the network policies. So with those, if you look for, let's say, CKA prep, this is what I referred personally, but if you do a search using your favorite search engine and you search for CKA prep, you will come across similar repositories, and you can refer to those. Apart from these repositories, there were obviously blogs which I found useful. Since this is a 2-hour test, your speed matters quite a lot. You have to be really fast with your commands, and you have to be able to manage switching context and be able to find resources, update resources very quickly. So this particular post, which is quite old, I would say about 1.5 year old, it is still relevant in a sense that it talks about how you can be fast with kubectl. And in this post, you will find some references where how you can set up your editor also to have some of the properties, like how you can set up the aliases, how you can set up when you copy and paste, let's say from the documentation content, then you need a way to align that or indent that. So this post also talks about the settings that you need to do for your editor. So again, quite handy tool. and definitely you need this kind of setup. If not this particular post, you can find similar post online to see how you can speed up your execution when you are answering the test. The next one is how to nail the Kubernetes certification. So this gives you a idea or tips and tricks about how you can clear all the 3 Kubernetes certifications. So I will provide again these links in the description. You can find that. There is a cheat sheet similar to the cheat sheet provided by Kubernetes itself, but this time it is provided by CodeFresh, and this is quite compact compared to the lengthy one which is provided by Kubernetes. So in case you are restricted to very few set of instructions, let's say you are not dealing with all the kinds of objects that Kubernetes provides, but you need a very small subset, this might be useful for you. The CKA practical challenge series, this I found very useful because the person who created this series, he walks you through different scenarios. So the other resources which I talked about, you need to pay for the practice test and things like that to get access to those resources. But here you are given a kind of question or a scenario, and the creator of this series walks you through the detailed steps which are required to answer that question, and what is the approach you will take step by step for different kinds of activities like multi-container pods, then services, how do you do node management, how do you manage certificates. I'm sorry, this screen is shaking a little bit, but okay. So if it can just stay in one place. Yeah, so here you can see that it talks about the scheduling, advanced scheduling, the certificate management, pod priority, and this is an evolving series, so I think that there would be more topics added as we go along. So if you are preparing in the current scheme of things, you can still refer to these 7 different types of questions or sample scenarios which he has created. And there is also Rudy Martinsons, who created the CKA resources based on his requirement for the CKA test. This is again similar to the earlier one, where you have different kinds of scenarios which he has created, and this is more extensive because he has already cleared his test, and he created those scenarios as part of his learnings or understanding. So you can find, along with CKA, also the study notes for CKA and the CKAD as well. So again, if you're preparing for those 2 exams, I'm sure you will find this resource very, very useful. So let's go back to the presentation. Next, I would like to share some of the tips which I personally implemented during my preparation as well as taking up this exam. So before exam, I would say watch out for the discounts like Black Friday or Cyber Monday, or any of the festival discounts like Christmas, Deepavali or Eid. Usually you will find during these kind of heightened activities where everybody is trying to sell things, you will find discounts on this tests, and it would be easier for you, or financially it will be easier. Instead of paying 100%, you pay a discounted rate. In terms of the commands, or in terms of being familiar, as I said, this test is purely hands-on. There is no multiple choice question. You really need to understand what the question is or what the task is required of you to complete that particular question, and you have to be efficient with kubectl command and the different options that are available for each of the command. So it is better you know how the imperative commands works, and you become familiar with that. If you are coming from Windows background, then you need to learn the basics of the editor for Linux. It is all Linux environment where these Kubernetes clusters are set up. So you need to know either the VI or Vim editor or Nano editor, and at least learn the commands of how to edit files, how to save files using these one of these editors. The next step is practice. whoever has passed this test, they will tell you that practice, practice, practice. There is no shortcut to clear this test. The only way you can clear it is by knowing what you are doing and be very fast with that. Because of the time constraint, it's limited to 2 hours. You get about, in my case, I got 17 questions. The weightage of the questions varies from 2% to 13%. So some questions are very simple, I would say, straightforward. So you will have just one screen and everything will be in one screen, but some of them are quite lengthy and you will have to scroll through the content. So if you are not efficient, if you don't know how to run these commands fast, you will spend a lot of time just trying to copy commands from maybe cheat sheet or somewhere else, and I'm sure you will find it very difficult to clear the test in such scenarios. So practice as much as possible. Bookmark specific links. This one I would say is my personal experience, that when I took the test first time, I bookmarked the top level pages. So let me go back to the documentation and show you what I mean by that. So since you are allowed to open one tab during the test or during the exam, you can bookmark things and then you can refer to those. So I had these bookmarks, and say for example, let me go to services and networking and I say service here. This is like the complete page or complete documentation related to the service, and this contains, you can see the length here, or you can see the subtopics here. There are so many things under this, and if you bookmark at this level, it might be difficult for you to find the exact thing that you're looking for in the exam. So my recommendation is, or what I did personally when I attempted the test second time, is to organize the bookmarks and to create subfolders within these topics, like within workload scheduling. If you see, I have deployment, secrets, config maps as separate, and even inside that create a very specific one, like container environment using secret or managing secret using kubectl. So you don't have to look for that information in a big page. You know exactly where to look for. Or let me take a example which I found useful, or which was very helpful for me during the exam itself: storage and the persistent volume, where it says configure a pod to use persistent volume. So in this case, you might find all other documents or other documentation, but what you need is this YAML file or this YAML content, and as long as you can get to it quickly, you will find it useful. You can copy this, you can paste it into your exam, and that is what I did for all these resources. So my suggestion here is, when you bookmark to a very granular level instead of bookmarking the top level page. It will help you definitely in the exam, that you can find your resources quite easily, and it will save you a lot of time. I can share the links, or I can share the bookmarks if there is some way to share the bookmarks, but I think it's easier based on your personal choice and the browser that you use, that you create your own bookmarks based on your comfort level as well. And the last thing I did was to take up a practice test. So if you register for the Kubernetes related exams with Linux Foundation and CNCF after June 2021, you are given the practice test access for killer.sh, and this environment is available for 36 hours, and you get 2 attempts or 2 simulations of the same exam, and you also get answers to the questions. So it is quite helpful that in case you are not able to answer the question, you will find the solution that is provided by killer.sh with a complete explanation, and that will be helpful for you to understand how to attempt those questions which are part of the actual exam. And this killer.sh is actually slightly difficult. The question level or the complexity level is slightly difficult compared to the actual test. Then during the exam, once you are confident, once you have done all these things and you are ready to take up the test, I would say recommend that you use an external monitor. You are allowed to use external monitors. So let me show you my setup that I had during the exam and what I used for the actual test. So this is how my setup looked like. I have my laptop connected to the widescreen monitor, which is 49 inches long. I split this into two halves, or two screens, you can say. One half is related to all the documentation, and the second half is for the actual test that I was taking. So you are allowed to refer to some documentation from Kubernetes, like kubernetes.io docs, the GitHub repo of Kubernetes, and the blogs from Kubernetes. You can use one tab apart from your actual test as a reference. So in this case, even if you don't have, let's say, this widescreen monitor, you can still use your laptop plus one external monitor and you can share the screen. You will have to share all the screens with the proctor who is monitoring your live test. And you are also allowed to use external devices, like in my case I use the mouse as well as external keyboard. So that is also allowed. You will have to show the complete room to the proctor, and if something is not allowed, they will ask you to remove it from your workspace. Your workspace has to be completely clutter free, and there should not be any mobile devices or anything other than your laptop. So in this case, this is how I took up the test, and I highly recommend that you use an external monitor, because that would help you to speed up. You don't have to switch tabs and things like that. I found this personally very useful, because the other test which I took earlier, they did not have this feature. You had to take it only with your laptop, and having this access to the external monitor was really useful in my case. Next thing is enable the kubectl auto-completion, because you will have to look for resources, and if you don't have the auto-completion, then it would be quite difficult to type everything manually. So if you again look back at the cheat sheet which I shared earlier, it explains you how to set up the auto-completion. If it is not set up in your environment, test environment, set it up as the first thing. You can also create aliases. So for some of the common tasks which we keep doing, like creating resources using kubectl apply, then finding resources, those can be aliased, and you will save a lot of typing by creating those aliases. Same thing goes for your code editor that you're going to use. You can create the profile. So when you copy and paste content from the Kubernetes reference docs into your editor, it can be aligned and it can be indented. So those settings, I would say take initially 2 to 5 minutes to set this up in your test environment. Time management is very important. This is where I struggled the first time I took up the test, and probably that is the reason I could not clear it in the first attempt. So the thing that you can do to improve your time management is use the copy feature instead of typing. In your questions, you will have different things to create with specific names, specific labels, like services, deployments. They will need to be created under a specific namespace. They will have to have a specific name. So instead of typing those manually, suggest that you copy that, whatever is the content, and then paste it in your YAML files or on the imperative command that you're typing. That will save you some time in debugging in case there is a typo. There is a notepad feature provided in the test, so use that wisely. So let's say you are answering something, or you want to refer something back, you can put that as a note in the notepad. You can also flag the questions for review. So there are multiple questions and you can go back and forth. So you can mark questions which you are not sure. So you will see a timer in your exam as the time passes. So instead of spending a lot of time on one single question and getting stuck, you can flag it in case you're not sure or you want to spend more time on it, but you have a lot of questions to be answered. It's always better to flag those for review later. And that's similar to the last tip that I have. Don't spend too much time on single question. You can complete all the questions, and those which you're not quite comfortable or confident, flag them and come back and visit them again. And most importantly, verify your solution, because you have 6 different clusters with which you need to work with. The first thing that you see in this questions is the command to switch the context. But by mistake, if you happen to use a different cluster, then it's better to verify that you are using the right cluster. That's the first thing I would say after completing the task. Make sure that you are running your solution, or you're putting your all the solution or your effort into the right cluster, right context. And once you have answered the task or completed the task, verify that it is as per the expectations. Say for example, you have to create a deployment in a particular namespace with a specific name. You can verify that it is indeed created under that namespace and with the specific name that was requested for. So with that, I come to the end of this tips and tricks. These are some of the social media handles that I use. I hope you found this useful. This was quite, I would say, it took me some time to complete this. I got this bundle last year. I should have completed it earlier, but for some or the other reason, it took me a long time to finish. But nevertheless, I have completed and I'm quite satisfied with the end result. I hope you found these tips useful. If there is something you would like me to share with the audience of my blog as well as my YouTube, please feel free to put it in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Thanks for watching.